Hey everybody, welcome to the live stream. Today we have a special program planned. We'll be talking about the top 5 ways to get rejected for the UK Global Talent Visa. Actually, when I was preparing for this live stream, I realized that there are many more ways to get rejected than just five. So I'll talk about the biggest problems that I usually see with applications for this visa, all in the hopes of helping you increase your chances if you decide to apply for the Global Talent Visa. So, for those who are new here and who have never been on this channel, who have never been to any of my webinars, this is a short intro about who I am. I am Nadia. I am a perpetual immigrant. I've lived in a bunch of places, and you can see the countries where I lived in the first row. Professionally, I've done a lot of things as well. So, I've worked as a journalist, as a translator, an author, a software engineer. Currently, I work as a DevRel, and also I work as a UK Global Talent Visa coach. I received the UK Global Talent Visa last year as a software engineer, and since then, I've been helping people increase their chances of getting endorsed. And among my clients have been people who work in various occupations in tech. So software engineers, designers, product managers, heads of business development, data analysts, Q engineers, startup founders, and many others. So basically, I think at this point I've helped a lot of different professions within tech. So, but of course, it's not limited to just this list. I think that once you crack the formula of technician, I think you can pretty much advise pretty much anybody who works in tech, because the requirements for people in different occupations are very similar, and they're much more similar than people think. So, in case you want to stay in touch with me and get updates on what I'm doing, get updates on the Global Talent Visa, and just follow along, you can visit my website, beetlehub.com. Here you can subscribe for the email updates. I think this is the most efficient way of staying in touch and making sure that you don't miss anything. You can also view my services that I offer. You can also view the recording of my previous webinar, and this one will be there as well. You can see the testimonials from my amazing clients, and learn more about what I offer. The services tab is also there. You can learn more about my coaching services and all the ways that I can help people increase their chances of getting endorsed. There is also the tutorial tab, which is a pretty extensive 9-part tutorial that I recorded last year to help you understand the criteria for the visa and the process of applying for it. And there is also the About section where you can learn more about me. And yeah, as always, I do encourage people to interact with each other in chat. It does help YouTube promote this live stream. And I really hope that as many people as possible see this live stream in the recording or live. So if you're watching this live or recording, I do encourage you to hit the like button and also subscribe to my channel if you haven't. This will mean a lot to me because I do spend a lot of time and energy sharing information for free in the hopes of encouraging others to apply and increase their chances. So if you can, hit the like button and support it. I'm very curious to learn whether you are planning to apply for the Global Talent Visa before March 31st. So if you are aware, Technation announced that it's closing its doors on the 31st of March. So in just a few weeks. And I'm curious to learn whether you're hoping to apply before this deadline or you're hoping to apply later, and in general, what your plans are. If you're not sure, just let me know in the chat what your plans are. I think this will be very helpful for me to understand the audience of this live stream. Let me know. Yeah, so I see a message from Allison, who's applying before the deadline, and another message from Effort, also planning to apply before. This is great. I do encourage everybody who is interested in this visa to apply as soon as possible. This is the guidance I shared immediately after we learned about the technicians' plan to close down. I've advised it to my followers, all of my clients, and everybody really made an effort to apply as soon as possible. So it's been quite a ride since the beginning of February when this news broke. So I think that it's really great that you are planning to apply. You are planning to use this opportunity, and I hope that this live stream is helpful. I also encourage you to ask questions in the chat while we go through it. I will try to answer them. Some questions are very difficult to answer on the live stream if they're very specific to your application. But if you have questions that are more generic and that can be helpful to others as well, I think I'll be happy to handle them during this. So the Q&A will be more towards the end, but also feel free to ask during my presentation so that I can react and maybe give more context. If something that I'm saying isn't quite clear, make sure to ask your question to clarify. I don't think that, like we don't know what will happen after the end of March. So we're not sure what the new endorsement body will be, what the rules will be, what the changes will be. Everything that we know right now is that until March 31st, you can apply under the old rules. The applications are open, and these are the rules that I'm most familiar with. So the advice from today will help you guide you towards the most successful version of your application that I can help you in the format of a live stream. Of course, you can reach out to me if you need more personalized help afterwards. But again, just use this opportunity to ask questions. If something isn't quite clear in what I'm saying, or maybe something has been bugging you, but you haven't been able to find an answer, I do encourage you to ask those questions in chat. And hopefully this will help you, but also it will help others avoid making the same mistakes. Okay, so the top ways to get rejected for the visa. This is obviously tongue in cheek. There is no like top ways to get rejected. It's just more of a list of things that I've seen people do wrong and really miss in the requirements for the visa. So where is this coming from? Like why should you believe what I'm saying, and where do I get this information? So this is based on a couple of sources. So first of all, I've done a lot of research when applying for the visa myself last year. So I've read pretty much everything that existed online on that topic. There was much less information last year. So I listened to webinars, I read forums, I read Telegram chats and all of that to prepare to learn about the expectations of TechNation. Afterwards, after I got endorsed for the visa myself, and I applied for the visa myself, and I got endorsed from the first attempt. After that, I started doing even more research, and I've started reading all the Russian-speaking Telegram channels that exist. Maybe not all of them, but I'm in a lot of them. All the forums, and just keeping in touch with what's happening in the world of rejections and endorsements. And then when I started coaching people and consulting them through the process, I've started having a lot of people reach out to me who prepared their documents on their own, or maybe they prepared their documents with another consultant or another lawyer or another immigration company. And I've seen a lot of mistakes that repeat themselves from different cases. So sometimes it stems from the fact that people misunderstand very similar things. Sometimes people are confused by the TechNation visa guide, and the guide is, some places in it are so confusing that people tend to make the same mistake. Also, people who go through various bigger immigration companies, their cases are also similar. So they have similar structures, but also they might have similar errors that diminish the chances of getting endorsed. So everything that I'm saying today is based on me seeing a bunch of rejections and a lot of successful cases, and trying to decipher which things work and which things don't work, right? So hopefully this sets the stage for what's about to come. But if you have questions and if this is not clear, if you have concerns, again, just ask. If you're watching this as a recording, again, you can ask in comments. I try to get through the comments as soon as possible. But basically, the things that I'm saying today, they will help you increase your chances of getting endorsed. It doesn't mean that this will guarantee your endorsement. Nobody can guarantee 100% of endorsement, right? All we can do, all I can do today is to help you avoid the very similar mistakes that people tend to do. And I hope that this helps you. So I had a question, about applying before the end of March and how can we provide the required documents in less than 1 month. Indeed, it is challenging. So if you haven't started preparing your documents yet, I would say that in the past, I would say that it's almost impossible to prepare documents so quickly. But now I honestly see people doing the most amazing things in just a week or 10 days. So this is definitely not easy, but I think depending on various factors, I think you can actually prepare a successful application in just 2 weeks. But then you have to spend a lot of time, a lot of focus, and also you kind of have to be quite lucky in terms of having a strong network of experts who will be able to support your application. I have this weird noise here. I don't know if you can hear it. You can let me know. Sorry. Anyway, let me know if you can hear me okay, if the sound is still okay. Okay, so let's start. And keep saying hi in chat. I'm always glad to see comments and support from you. Okay, no noise. Okay. I have noise. That's pretty distracting, but never mind. Cool. So if you have done I hope you have done your research since you're applying for the visa in less than 2 weeks. Hopefully you have done your research and hopefully you understand that the biggest reason, like the foundation of any successful visa application, the global talent visa application, are the letters of recommendation, right? So letters are fundamental. You can't really do without them, right? But also they're not enough. Like you have to have something else outside of letters. But letters are the key to your success in most of the cases. And it's quite easy to make a mistake when it comes to letters. And there are, different versions of mistakes that people make with letters. So on the one hand, it's very easy to fail when it comes to choosing the experts who will prepare your letters of recommendation, who will support you with letters of recommendation. So first, you can choose their own experts. And second option is that you can choose the correct experts, but you fail to present them in a way that convinces TechNation that they are correct experts. And I will explain what I mean in just a second. So first of all, like what is a good expert for TechNation? Who is a good expert? So a good expert is somebody who has an established and distinguished career in the field of digital tech. Ideally, they have done it mostly in product-led companies and not consultancies. It's really great if this person has a public profile, if they have a lot of publications or they have done public speaking. So basically, if you Google your expert, you can see some trace of them online. It's cool if they have worked in famous big name companies, if they have made an impact in big companies. So this is like an ideal expert that exists in the vacuum a little bit, right? We live in the real world where we don't always get to have access to people like this. A lot of candidates that I talk to, they don't have, not all of their experts are like this. So then we work kind of more closer to the real world and understanding like what is the best expert that you can find that still fits those criteria. So this can be that should be somebody who has senior positions in the company. It doesn't have to be the CEO of the company, but also it can't be just like a regular IC or individual contributor, right? If we're talking about the main letters of recommendation. If they don't have a public profile, it's not the end of the world. So I've seen successful cases where the expert doesn't really have much of a public profile. So if you Google them, you don't see anything, but they still need to have a career that is impressive. So for instance, they have held leadership positions in a couple of product companies, and you can make a case for why they are an expert, right? So This is more or less the framework of thinking about experts. I'm curious whether this makes sense. You can let me know in the comments and I will clarify. I think this is one of the things where a lot of people get confused, like what is a good expert and what is not a good expert. When I'm coaching people, we usually spend a lot of time. It can actually take a couple of hours to go through the suggested experts that the client has thought of and make a decision of what is the best expert for this particular case. So it's not a quick decision, but hopefully, if you have chosen your experts wisely and they're already helping you with your letters, I hope they're the best that you can find. But also, if after hearing this, you understand that maybe you can suggest somebody else and somebody stronger, I think that this will be helpful as well. I had some questions asked in the meantime. So one was, should the letters come from head of departments or CEOs? So um, it depends on the company. So there are big companies where it will be very difficult for an individual contributor to get a letter from a CEO. But if you're working at a smaller company, then getting a letter from a CEO would be easier. And also, if you work in a startup, I think it just makes more sense that the letter is from a CEO, especially if it's a small company, right? So it depends on the situation. It doesn't have to be a CEO, but normally, as high up as you can go is best. Um, but it also has to make sense for this person to really know your work. So if you work in a huge company and you get a letter from a CEO where they talk about your work in detail, then this would just look very weird. So it has to make sense. And this person that is writing the letter, they have to know your work for at least 12 months. This is a relatively new requirement of Technation. They do enforce it quite strictly. So this is one of the things that I see in rejection letters as well, where the person submits a letter from somebody, but they don't explain how this expert knows their work for at least 12 months. It has to be super explicit in your letter of recommendation, right? So you should explain that we have worked with this person or you for since 2020, or I have had a chance to observe their work for at least 16 months or 24 months or something like this. And it has to be explicit. Some people ignore it, they think it's not important, but I have seen people get rejected for that. So make sure that this is clear in your letters. If your letters are drafted and ready, make sure that this is added there before the letter gets signed or adjusted. This is a minor thing, but it's still important. And this letter also has to explain how this expert knows your work in detail. So you need to explain the nature of your relationship with them. It doesn't. Sometimes people think that this means that this person has to be their manager or their colleague. On the contrary, if we're talking about the letters of recommendation, the big main letters, they shouldn't be from your manager. There should be some degree of separation between you and the person writing the letter. Again, I've seen rejections where technician assessor specifically mentioned that this letter was signed by a direct colleague or direct manager, and this is not applicable. So please make sure that there is some separation between you and the person writing this letter, because otherwise it is really easy to get rejected just because of that. And I think it's quite, I don't know, a stupid reason to get rejected. So this is a way to think about experts. So again, they have to be somebody who knows your work for at least 12 months. It has to make sense that they know your work. You have to explain it, but also they need to be um, a real expert in digital tech, somebody who has quite a career. I think that this is where the second mistake comes when it comes to experts, right? So you can have an expert who is actually a really cool leader in tech in your mind, right? So, for instance, you're writing a letter, or you're working with an expert. You ask somebody for a letter of recommendation, and to you both, it seems super obvious, right, that this person is an expert. But this is only because you know this person, and also maybe you know the context of your country. So, for instance, somebody is a real celebrity in your country. So, for instance, in Nigeria or Russia, like everybody knows this person, and when you're talking to somebody from your country, you don't have to explain to them why this person is really a celebrity. Maybe they're a household name, like everybody knows them. However, technician doesn't know this person, right? The assessor who is reading your documents, they have no idea who this person is. So, in order for this letter to not get dismissed and kind of tossed out as irrelevant because this person is not an expert, you have to explain why this person is an expert. And this is something that is not clear from the technician guide. And this is something that 99% of people miss and don't really do in their letters of recommendation. But you have to explain why this person is an expert. So, the letter from this expert, it needs to start with a short explanation of what this person has done, what gives them the right to talk about this. This can be done in different ways, and I've heard people approach this differently. I don't have a very strong opinion as to how this is structured. So, some people would have a separate section on top of the letter where the person's career is described in glowing terms. Some people would have this inside the body of the letter. So, this would be the expert talking about themselves and explaining the relevance of their experience and what makes them an expert. Um, it doesn't matter how you do it, but just make sure that you have a paragraph or two that explain this. Those paragraphs are not counted towards the limit of 3 pages. And I will talk about the limit of 3 pages a lot in this. But if you're planning to apply soon, make sure that your documents are within 3 pages, despite what some people might tell you, some experts might tell you. It's not fine to submit letters that are longer, or documents that are longer than 3 pages. You would see rejections if you go onto forums and chats. You would see people getting rejected just for this reason. And again, to me, it seems like such a stupid reason to get rejected. There are rules in the guide that you are supposed to follow, right? So if you're writing, this letter from an expert, it has to be within 3 pages. The stuff that I said about their career, it's not included. The contact details are not included. So make sure that the content, the actual content of the letter praising you, is within the 3 pages. So this is kind of the way to think about experts, and spent quite a while talking about experts, and this is only the first reason to get rejected. But experts are super important if you have time to really analyze the people who are supporting your application as experts, and just ask yourself this difficult question: are this the strongest expert that you can find? Can you maybe ask somebody else to vouch for you? Is there anybody else in your network you can reach out to? Here again, since I work with a lot of people, I know the struggles that a lot of people have. You might feel weird reaching out to your, I don't know, your head of product at your company, and asking them to help you with this. The vibe of this visa application is very, it's just very uh, high praise. I don't know how to explain it, but it's quite. For some people, it just feels very weird to ask their superiors to help them praise themselves in such glowing terms, right? So you might be in the situation. If you feel this way, I understand this, and I feel for you, and I feel very sorry. I know that this is hard, and but we all have to go through this. And I think that if you understand why you need this visa, what your purposes are, what your goals are when it comes to the visa, what you intend to do, and if you really believe that you have the case, if you have the achievements, if you have done your contributions at companies, if you have done your outside contributions, if you really have a goal for being in the UK on this visa, I think that this can help you cope with this fear of approaching people. Honestly, most of the time, people won't really care. They will be happy to help you if you explain to them why you need help. And you explain to them what is needed, what is the expectation, what is the requirement here. If you explain this, people will be happy to help. So this is my message to you. If you are sitting on a good expert and you haven't reached out to them because you feel that you're not very comfortable with this, but if this expert is just so much stronger than the ones that you already have, I would encourage you to really kind of stay with this discomfort and reach out to them, because it really does matter. So the letters of recommendation, as I said, are a fundamental thing, and they consist of two aspects. So there are the experts, and then there is the content. right? And you can't have a successful letter without both of those things. You need the expert, but you also need good content. So this is the first part of it that I've covered. I'll take a look at the questions now. If you have something about the experts, please make sure to ask. Also, especially if you're preparing to apply now and you're thinking between two options and you aren't sure like which one to choose. I think this is a good question to ask as well. So I had a question about, can this be from a mentor? I think um, there was something like this. Yeah. So I think that the question is like, who is this mentor? So this is like, again, a question in the vacuum. So the question is like, who is this mentor? Do they have a career in tech? Like, are they an established expert? Can you explain how they are an expert? And then you need to explain how they know your work for at least 12 months. So there is this misconception that those people have to be from your jobs, right? So people sometimes struggle because maybe you worked only in one company for 5 years and you might struggle understanding like who can you ask if all of your letters would come from your place of work. So the letters don't have to be from your employment. It can be from other spheres of life where you contributed in tech. So this can be things related to open source, community work, volunteering. Like maybe you were helping an NGO grow, an NGO that is promoting the field of tech. um, so this can be really different people. So in terms of a mentor, if you can make a case that this person is an expert and they know your work, I think that's good. But I think that it's not perfect for, especially for talent application. For I would encourage to um, reach out to somebody who would be able to talk about you as somebody they look up to, because again, with a mentor, I think the relationship would be a little bit different, and it would be, I think, hard for this person to really praise you as one of the top experts in the field, which is a requirement for the talent route. For promise, I think it's a little bit different. So this can be made work as well, but it's a little bit less straightforward, I think. So here, I think this would need to be discussed in detail, kind of in more in better detail. But on principle, there is no restriction on this being a mentor. In general, if you're in doubt, always consult the Tech Nation visa guide for things that are not allowed, and just don't do them. I think this will put you ahead of the curve. And this will make your application better than a lot of applications that people submit. So, for instance, the guide mentions that the letter can't be from your boss or your colleague, right? So don't get letters from your manager or your colleagues. This is, I think, good advice to keep in mind. Okay, so what else? Okay, so there was another question. On graduating from the university, I took a letter of recommendation from two doctors, department head and another doctor from the university. I used it to apply for my master. Do you think this letter can help? So here, I would encourage you to read the technician guide. Here, you will learn that for the global talent visa, you need to get completely new letters of recommendation that are written for this specific purpose. So the letter has to mention that this is done for the purposes of applying for the visa, but also the structure and the content of those letters is completely different. So there is no point in submitting letters that were written for some other purpose. They will be rejected, and they won't really help your case in any case. So follow the guide, and I think this will help you avoid a lot of the errors. Okay, so there is another question. Letter from a CEO of a customer company works. I don't know what it means, a customer company. My brother is a lead tech expert with a strong public resume. Can be my recommender. Family relations won't be a matter. That's actually an interesting question. So the guide mentions that the letter can't be from friends, right? I do assume that this would apply to family as well. Some things that are not explicitly forbidden in the guide. I think that they are, that there is the letter of the law and then the spirit of the law. To me, it seems like getting a letter from your brother maybe doesn't break the letter of the guide. because you can say, this is not my friend, but I think that it breaks the spirit of it. So I would encourage you to find somebody who is a little bit detached from you and who can provide objective information about you and your experiences. Cool. So let's talk about content. So content is the second biggest part of the success of the letters, and it's also very easy to make a mistake here. So top ways to get rejected in terms of the content of your letters are probably the following. So being too vague is one problem that I see a lot. So, and again, I see rejections for this quite a lot as well. So, some candidates, they are just super vague in their application, in their whole application, but then their letters of recommendation are vague as well. So, the letter can talk about you being an amazing expert or like the best designer in the country or the most exceptional software engineer, and the expert can say that they're very excited to know you and they're happy to support your application, and they think that you will make an impact in the UK, and that's good. That should be part of your letter, but it's not enough, right? So your letter should be about something, which is true, I think, of all writing and of all forms of content, really. So people really struggle with this, and I'm not sure where this is coming from. I think a lot of it is kind of cultural differences in communication, and I will talk about this later. I think I have a slide about cultural differences when it comes to communication and how we communicate ideas. But it doesn't really matter like what your reasons are to do this. Just don't do it. Don't submit documents that are vague and that are about nothing. So when I coach people through the process of applying for the visa, I usually start with I always start with a strategy session. Sometimes we do a discovery call, but like working with the client, it always starts with a strategy session. And during the strategy, we before the strategy, actually, the client goes through a homework exercise that developed and I send out. But basically, this is an exercise in brainstorming and coming up with the content for your application, right? So there are different aspects to it. There are the people who will support you, but then there's also the content. So like, what will this be about? The content here usually revolves about a lot of it will be your work project. So I usually ask my clients to come up with a list of uh, projects or just units of work, and this can be very different depending on your field, but some um, unit of work that you can think about, that you can describe, you can talk about it, and you can say what the project was, why this was significant, what the impact was, what was the before and after this project, how you showed leadership within this project, what would have happened if you didn't do this project, right? Think about those examples. I usually ask people to come up with at least 7 examples of this can be from different companies where you worked. This can be, usually it's more, like you would need more content for this, but unless you start with understanding like what are the specific stories that the letters will talk about, you will really mess up your documents. I'm sorry, this sounds harsh, but I've just seen people go through this. If you don't understand like what the documents will be about, it's very hard to make them convincing. So the most convincing thing and the most usual format of information that we are used to as humans is a story, right? So this is why I encourage my clients to come up with stories that they can share in their application. So a story is basically an expert saying that there was a situation in the business that was very challenging, that there was an issue that the company faced. Um, they really didn't know how to solve it, or maybe there was some inefficiency, but like nobody noticed it, nobody was solving it, and then until you came along, you saw this inefficiency, you saw this problem, you jumped on board, you came up with a solution, you led others behind you, you made difficult decisions, you delivered it on time, you delivered it ahead of the deadline. You made a huge impact, and because of this project that wouldn't have happened without you, your company was able to make money, raise an investment round, hire more people, or I don't know, stay profitable or survive, right? So this is a framework. So I'm giving it to you right now. All you have to do is just use it and fill the blanks with your life, like your achievements. Think of the things that you are most impressed by, not impressed by, proud of, right? So um, I think that helps a lot of my clients is thinking of what would you talk about during your performance review. If you have performance reviews, you can just use the document that you prepare. So which are the units of work that you would tell your boss about that, for instance, got you promoted? And this can be the foundation of the letters. This can be the foundation of the stories that you tell, but it has to be something specific, some specific stories about projects with specific impact. So for the third optional criteria, and I'll talk about criteria later, you have to show impact. Impact is most easily measured in numbers. It doesn't have to be like huge numbers, it doesn't have to be money, but it has to be some sort of numerical value, ideally, or just explaining what the impact is. You can do this in words as well. So, again, just to reiterate, don't be vague. Be explicit about what you're talking about, right? Let me know again if this doesn't quite make sense. I'm doing this to make sure that everybody understands this and people don't write vague letters. But also another problem with content is letters that are too shy. And this is very much like this is very, very tied to your cultural background and the way you were socialized when growing up, whether you were told that bragging is bad or whether you were brought up to think that you have to advocate for yourself and you have to talk about your achievements. So this will be tied to that. And obviously, I am a visa coach, but I'm not like a therapist, so I won't be able to help with that. Uh, you just need to adopt a different frame of mind when you are working on the documents like this. So the documents, they have to be strong, like all of your documents. So this says letters, but it's actually like everything. You have to use strong examples. So the achievements that you're using, they need to be real, and they need to have impact. And I think it's obvious, but like it has to be true, the things that you're talking about. They need to be impressive, but also it's not enough for them just to be significant. You have to explain to technician why they're significant, right? You need to use strong language. You need to explain things in a very explicit way. You shouldn't assume that they will understand it. So maybe you worked on a project in a company and you spent 6 months on it, and then the company prospered afterwards. And to you, it seems very obvious, and to the expert, it seems very obvious. However, the decision will be made by technician assessor, and they have no idea about your company, your project, your life, what you do. So none of this, like they have no concept of it. They don't know you, right? Only you know your work and your achievements and your expert. So this has to be explained in the letters in strong language. This is probably, I see when I see rejection sometimes, rejections are very weird. Some of them seem random. Sometimes you would see people with very similar documents either get rejected or get endorsed. But also, you see only usually like if it's on a forum, you usually see just a list of the documents that they submitted, and then either they got the visa or they didn't get the visa. But you don't actually see the documents themselves, right? You don't see the language and the structure and how they were formatted. I do think that there is a strong correlation between how strong the letters are and whether you get the visa or not. If you look at rejections, very often they are quite vague, and they just mention that the technician assessor, they didn't feel that your achievements were strong enough to fit the expectation of a global talent or promise. And this is very subjective. So it might feel very unfair or arbitrary to you if you're applying and if you get rejected. especially if you get a reply like this that they felt that you weren't good enough, right? So here, first of all, I really want you, if this happens, like not to take it to heart. Very often it just means that you didn't present your evidence well. It doesn't mean that your experience wasn't as good as someone else's. So this visa is meant to attract people to the UK who will advance the digital economy. That's it. So it's not a visa for Nobel Prize laureates. It's not a visa to find the next Mark Zuckerberg. It's a visa to find talented people who work in tech and who are prepared to live here, work here, pay taxes here, and just move the country forward. That's it. So if you get rejected, it's not an estimate kind of how good you are. Very often it comes down to whether you were able to convince. I mean, it always comes down to whether you're able to convince the human on the other end of the screen of you being worthy of this visa. And honestly, I don't know if it helps you, but if you feel self conscious about praising yourself or asking the expert to praise yourself, just think of people who won't have this reservation. And I have seen a lot of letters of people, kind of from different cases. And I know the kind of language that those letters use. I know the kind of level of excitement that those letters produce. I think that there is a certain kind of baseline that is expected at this point. So if you just don't try to meet it, I think it will be very sad to get rejected just because your letters were kind of mellow, right? So I know that like using strong words or like enthusiastic words, it's kind of vague, but a lot of it comes down to whether this letter sounds impressive or not. And I do believe that intuitively, we should be able to understand it. I understand that this might be difficult, and this is where I help people when I do a review package. And I read the letter and I read the documents, and I can say, okay, this is strong enough. This might be improved and made stronger. But normally, if you don't work with me or somebody else, you can ask yourself whether this letter feels like you're applying for a job or you're applying for the global talent visa. Those things are very different. And thinking about this can really help you determine whether your documents are up to the standard or not. And this applies to a personal statement, to the CV, especially, and I'll talk about the CV later. But just ask yourself, would I be able to, like this document, like this letter of recommendation, would I be able to submit it to apply for a job? And if you say yes, and this letter just seems very reasonable and appropriate for like a, I don't know, job application or something like this, then it's probably not strong enough, because the letters that I see people submit for the global talent visa and get successfully endorsed are very different. So they are very enthusiastic and they show the level of you being recognized as a leader in tech in very convincing words. So this is about the content. I think there is more to it, but this is, I think, the biggest problems that I see when I review documents. Let me check the chat whether you have any more questions. Okay, I have a question for comment from Mohammed while explaining you're really talented. Thanks. Yeah, I hope this makes sense. Okay, let's go to the next one, but keep the questions coming. Okay, so the next reason to get into rejected is choosing the wrong criteria. Well, criteria are difficult to choose. I hope that if you're applying for the visa soon, you have chosen the criteria and you have read the guide or you have watched my videos. You can find my tutorial on my YouTube channel. This is where I start the work with my clients on their cases. When I work with somebody, this is what we do in a strategy session. You have to choose the criteria. until you choose the criteria, I don't really see much of a point in progressing with gathering the other evidences. There is another approach that people use is gathering public mentions of you online and finding kind of public proof of your achievements, either about you or your company. I think this is also something that you can do. This can help you understand whether there is something there that can help you fulfill the criteria. But in the case where you don't have that much happening about you online, maybe if you have just a couple of publications about you or your companies, you can start with the criteria. Um, there is this another mistake here is not choosing the criteria at all, which people actually do. Uh, and just collecting evidences and hoping that they will work somehow. I really don't recommend this. So the next slide is about this. If you're being told that you can just submit um, every document towards every criteria, it's not really the way to go. So yes, some people would be able to get endorsed using this approach. Like, I don't think of this as an approach at all. So the idea here is that you gather some documents, like 10 documents, right? And you just submit them towards every criteria. And then Technation figures out which document proves what. I don't recommend it. I've never done this myself. I've never recommended this to any of my clients. I think it's quite a lazy approach. And it also, while it might work for some people, it might derail your application completely. So why I'm in that, and why I think that choosing the criteria is very important. So basically, if you know what you're trying to prove, then it becomes much easier to prove it. That's it. So for instance, if you know that you are trying to prove innovation, then this is how your documents are structured. This is what the expert focuses on in their letter of recommendation, right? If you're trying to prove academic achievements, then you look for evidences that prove that. If you are trying to prove your contributions outside of work, then you're looking for that. It's very good to have structure. I think this process is overwhelming as it is, especially if you're applying on your own. This is why last year I recorded my tutorial about the Global Talent Visa to try to explain the criteria, because this is where I myself spent, I think, a few months just trying to understand the criteria. And to be fair, it was a year ago. There was much less information online. There was no channel that I started. Um, and it was hard to understand them. But you need to understand the criteria. You can do this with information available online. You can reach out to a visa coach like me and understand the criteria. If you use an expert for something in this process, then I would recommend this then I would recommend that this is for choosing the criteria and understanding which documents you have will fulfill which criteria. So once you have that, the rest becomes not easy, but at least you understand what you are doing. If you don't do it, then you will really struggle. You will have this massive number of documents just floating around, and you will be overwhelmed with what's happening. And then at the end, you actually, when you apply for the visa on TechNation website, you have to choose the criteria. You have to choose two optional criteria. Somebody actually, so it's a radio buttons, and I always assume that since you have to choose two criteria out of the four, you can only choose two. But then somebody told me that actually you can choose four or three. So they apparently don't have the validation for that. I haven't checked it myself, so this might be wrong. But the fact that you can do it, it doesn't mean that you should. You will need to choose two criteria, and there will be a text box there where you will need to write the names of the documents that support each criteria. So there will be a box that says, please write the names of the documents that you have prepared that will prove the mandatory criteria, right? So you will need to write number one, and this will be, I don't know, maybe like public speaking. Number two, something else. Then you will have a separate box for the optional criteria number two or one, whatever you chose. And the same, you will need to write the documents. And yes, you can put just the names of every document in every box, but I would not advise you to do that. Do the homework beforehand. Choose what each criteria, which document does. Uh, it's still possible to have the same file fulfill two criteria. So if you read the technician guide, you will see certain things repeated, and it's raining really hard. So I do hope it's not too loud for you guys. Let me know. Hope not. So I lost it. I lost what I was saying. Okay. Anyways, I forgot what I was talking about. So yeah, you will okay, I remember. Yeah, so there are certain documents, there are certain evidence pieces that are repeated across different criteria. So you will see open source, for instance, in a bunch of places. You will see high salary in a bunch of places. However, um I think you should still need to understand like why this document is in two places. So I don't have like a strong opinion on like you can never repeat yourself and you can never have the same document in two places. I've seen people do it successfully, so it clearly works and it makes sense for some documents, right? So for instance, if you have what else, what can I say, for instance, articles. If you write articles about tech, um, you might have articles that you might use this document to fulfill mandatory criteria, but also the second optional. For mandatory, you would need to explain how those articles show that you have been recognized as a thought leader. And this is something that you would explain in the evidence piece. And then for the second criteria, you would show that this is actually you sharing knowledge, sharing information. There, you would need to show that this stuff that you're writing is actually read by people. So you can show the statistics of how many people read your article to show that it has some recognition, right? But when I but if I advise people to use the same document in two places, I always know why I'm doing it and it's not random, right? So as long as you can explain to yourself why a certain document is in separate places, then you can do that. But honestly, for this is a very limited number of documents that come to mind that work this way. For most documents, it's just each document goes to a specific criteria. Okay, let me look at the comments. Okay, so is my understanding that your reference letter can also be used for optional criteria if it makes specific mention of something that fits? Yes. So usually to support optional criteria, people use separate reference letters. So you would have your main letters of recommendation, the three big ones, right? Um, and then you would also have additional reference letters that are usually shorter that can fulfill specific goals for the optional criteria. So an example, so you will have a big letter of recommendation from, I don't know, CEO of your company talking about your leadership and your recognition as a leader. This would be your main letter of recommendation. It would also go towards the mandatory criteria. Obviously, like you wouldn't need to write its name to match it with the criteria, but it's just that by its nature, it meets the criteria of being recognized as a leader. But then you might also have a separate letter from somebody else at your company who will talk about your specific innovation. And then this letter can go to meet your innovation criteria. So that's the way to structure it. Hope this explains it. So there was another question, does technician have a checklist that they use to go through the application? So I don't have inside information about that, and I'm not associated with technician, but I assume there is a certain process that they go through when checking the application, which is why I recommend. I would assume that there are checklists, and I would assume that there are rubrics that need to be filled. This is clear from when you review the rejections. it's clear that they expect to see certain things and they don't see them. So this is why I recommend people to craft their applications in a very explicit way, in very simple and intuitive way. This is why I am against confusing technician with just weird, like not choosing criteria or applying the same document everywhere, because the more confusing you make it for them, the more likely it is that you will get rejected because something will get missed. The person reading this will be annoyed. And I always try to think of the user experience of the assessor. um, Imagine them reading your application, especially now. February was the record month for technician in terms of visa applications, of endorsement applications. I can only assume that March will be much worse. So if you're applying in the next few weeks, just think of this and think of how um, much will be on the plate of the assessors, right? So your job is to make it as easy as possible for them. So you can be as explicit and as obvious as possible with your documents, right? So the next step in this is as Allison is writing here, um, very helpful. Inspire them, don't annoy them. Yes, this is a good takeaway from this. This is so much about you um, presenting a convincing story that makes an impression, right? So don't think about this just as kind of ticking the boxes. You have to tick the boxes, obviously, and this is what this is about, right? The mistakes that you should not make. But there is something else that you need to do. You need to make the assessor feel something when they're reading the application. So this has to make sense. This has to connect in some shape or form, right? So it's more high level and it's very hard to explain this. But if you read your application from the beginning to the end, will it make sense? Just ask yourself this question. Like, just be honest with yourself. If it doesn't, take a step back and really ask yourself, like, okay, which are my criteria and which document proves the criteria? If you're not convinced yourself, then how are they going to be convinced, right? Um, so for mandatory criteria, this is the first one. This is the main one. This is everybody fulfills it. There are like various ways to fulfill it. So as I said, the letters of recommendation that you provide, and they're separate from the 10 documents, right? So you have 3 letters of recommendation, you have the CV and the personal statement. These are the 5 documents in the beginning of the application, right? Remember this. And then you have a slot for the 10 documents, 10 supporting evidences. They're all uploaded together. You can upload up to 10 PDF files, or there are other extensions, but usually it's PDFs. You don't have to have 10, but a lot of people do. It's not required. Like if you can make a convincing case in fewer than 10, that's fine. But if you think about the whole application, everything in it proves leadership, right? So every single document proves leadership. And no, I don't mean that you have to just drop each document into the mandatory criteria box. I just mean that if you think about it, like everything that you say about yourself, it should show you as a leader or a promising leader, because the visa is for leaders and promising leaders. So if you have really strong letters of recommendation, and if you have a very strong personal statement, and if you have very strong CV, then like a lot of your mandatory criteria would probably be covered if they're strong, right? But still, people usually, or I would say always, submit supporting evidences for the mandatory criteria. So these are separate things. You don't upload the same main letter of recommendation to this drop, this drop form where you drop documents. So one mistake that people make is only adding salary to support mandatory criteria. And this is again tongue-in-cheek slide. You can't just submit a lot of random financial documents to prove leadership. Despite what you might hear or see, okay, you can do that. And probably it's possible to get endorsed this way. But I would really encourage you not to do that. So if you go through the guide, you will see salary mentioned as one of the mandatory criteria documents. It is mentioned, and probably 99% of applicants would submit some sort of financial document. In my experience, I would say I've only had, I don't know, a couple of clients where we just decided that their case, like they have so much else going on when it comes to leadership, that like salary would be just the weakest part of it. And if you are honest with yourself, then you can ask yourself, like, what is my salary proving? So if you work at Fank, then I mean, congrats, like you've made it. So if you make £500,000 or dollars a year, in total compensation, then yes, by all means, please submit this information. Uh, However, if, for instance, you're just working in a medium-sized company and you're making more than the average, you can still, if you have space, you can still submit this document. You can still make a convincing case that this salary is higher than average, and this puts you in the top, I don't know, 10% of software engineers in your region or something like this. You can do that, but also understand that probably this won't be the strongest document. So this won't be something that convinces technician just to give you the visa. So again, I wish technician guide was more explicit and was more clear, but it's not. So I'm filling the gaps with this live stream and my channel. So think about this. So if you see something mentioned in the guide, you ask yourself, like, what does it mean? And um, why is it there, right? So if you see payment information or like salary somewhere, you can't just take your whole contract and upload it. How, like, what is technician supposed to do with this? What does it show them? It shows that you have a job, which is, nice, but what does it have to do with anything? You don't need to have a job to get the visa. It's not a requirement. You can be unemployed to get the visa, right? So if you're submitting some information about how much you're paid, just explain to them why it's there. Like, what are you trying to say? What is the point of this? And this is actually applies to everything. And again, I'm talking from experience. People sometimes upload documents that are not explained. They have no context. They are just sent there. And the idea is that technician will figure out what the hell this is. But it doesn't work this way. So they might get annoyed. They might get confused. They might not understand what this is. Because of this, they might maybe miss the next document that was much stronger. And this whole thing kind of collapses then, right? So salary, again, you can use it if you explain why this shows you as a leader. You can have, so normally people would have like a reasonable scenario is that you have a Google Doc that is 3 pages. Again, 3 pages, important. You put in information about your current job, for instance. You say that you were offered this much money and give you the year. Then you provide a screenshot of what the typical salary was at this point in time in this region. Then you explain that the fact that your salary is so much higher puts you in the top 10% of specialists in this region, which shows you being recognized as a leader, kind of. So it's a document. It's not the strongest one, but it's a document that you can use. So then you can provide other information about pay. So for instance, you can say that if you were promoted, for instance, you can find proof of that. You can find an email that congratulates you, that says you have done amazing work, and that information about your promotion. Maybe you're getting more equity, and equity is something that you should definitely mention. So this kind of, you build the case, you build a document around this. You tie the pay and the equity and the money to your worth as a specialist. So, but just understand like what you're doing, and don't upload documents without context. You don't have to upload the whole contract. I think this is where people again don't fully understand. You can have a screenshot of your contract that shows the relevant part, because most contracts are very long And you can upload 20 pages of it, but first of all, it doesn't follow the guide. And I know you may try to kind of uh, brute force it, and it might work for you, but I think that a good way to approach it would be not to do that. um, just respect the guidelines, follow it, because I think that meeting the expectations is hard enough for you without creating those like weird obstacles and, like, I don't know, fun reasons to write an appeal afterwards. Also, we aren't sure like what the future of technician is when it comes to the visa, so I can't tell you what the way to appeal will be after 31st of March. So just do it the best way you can right now, right? So just follow the rules. Salary, I hope this makes sense what I explained. It's not enough just to have salary for mandatory. I think this is a big takeaway, which is where a lot of people actually fail. Okay, so I'm not seeing any questions. So I hope this is clear. So, okay, you might ask, if I cannot submit 15 contracts from various companies to fulfill mandatory, so like what do I do, Nadia? So which kind of documents do I submit? So there are very different ones that you can submit. So this criteria is about proving that you are a leader in your space. So for instance, you are a leader in Web3. So a good way to prove this would be to get a reference letter, an additional letter. So this is an additional one to the ones that, the big ones that we discussed. You can get this letter from a recognized expert in tech. It would also follow the same format. So it would talk about how they know your work. Again, this is the requirement about 12 months. It still applies to those evidences. This is newer addition to the guide. Make sure that this is still true. So this is, I think, was added to react to people. And again, this is just my assumption. I don't have any information on this, but it feels like this requirement was added to make it a little bit harder to qualify with the letters, right? So you now have to prove that this person who is writing the letter actually knows you, and you haven't just met at an event once and then they wrote a letter about how great you are. So you can have a reference letter from an expert in Web3 who will talk about you and your impact and your recognition in the industry. So this can be a good document there. Usually people would also have something else, and this is a common refrain throughout all the criteria, really. So it's not enough just to have letters. Letters are important, and you can't get the visa without them. But you also can't get the visa with just letters. I know sometimes people struggle with this. I'm not sure why, but I've had those questions asked a lot of times. So this is why I'm explaining it. So if it's obvious to you, then, yeah. So you have to have both. You have to have letters supporting the criteria, but also something else. And something else is different for everybody. Some people would have a document about their public speaking. Some people would have a document about their articles or publications in industry mediums. So industry publications. Why are here again? People sometimes are confused about what is the connection between public speaking and leadership. Again, if you don't explain it, technician might not understand it either. So you have to explain how the fact that you talked at the conference makes you a recognized leader, because this is where the thought leadership comes in, right? So the mandatory is very much about thought leadership. So if you think of yourself in the industry and whether people regard you as a thought leader, it doesn't have to be like a huge number of people, and you don't have to be the leading voice of Web3 in the world, but you need to make a case for you being recognized as a opinion leader, maybe in some niche. That's fine. Like, it doesn't have to be massive, but you will need to explain the context of it. So this applies actually for all the documents. It applies for all the criteria. It applies for everything in your application. And I do want you to remember this and take this away from this webinar. You have to explain every little thing in your application. This is why the application process is so tiring and people just get exhausted, especially towards the end, because it feels like you will never be done with explaining stuff. But I'm sorry, guys, but this is what it takes. Like it's the best visa the UK has currently. So it takes a lot of work and you have to explain everything. So for instance, if you're talking about the conference that you talked at, you might think that this is the best known conference in the space. However, technician won't know this. You have to explain to them why this conference is significant. You have to explain to them why it's significant that you were called there. It's good if you can get a reference letter from the organizer of the conference who will explain this. And they will be very explicit about um, inviting you there as a recognized expert. Or, they can be saying that we invited John Smith to talk about this topic because of his blog where he has been talking about this topic for many years. So we thought that he would be the best person to talk to our audience about it and to teach them. And then they would say, and this conference was a huge success. A lot of people showed up, and you have to give a number. Ideally it should be over 100 people, which is the requirement for of the criteria. So they can say that 150 people showed up to hear John Smith's excellent lecture, and we were all very impressed. We received a lot of feedback. We were very happy that we invited them, and we are happy to support their application for the UK Global Talent Visa. This is the approach. So this is the framework for presenting all of your evidences, basically. Given context and explaining why the thing that you are showing to them is doing what you're hoping it to do, right? So this, I think, will make your application like a million times stronger, and this will make your application probably better than what most people compose, especially if you're applying on your own. Make sure that you follow this. You can ask maybe somebody else to read the document that you're preparing and ask them, okay, tell me, does this document show that I'm a recognized leader or not? And if the answer is no, then maybe you need to add more detail and you need to explain it a little bit more. I'm not seeing many messages, so guys, are you still here? Let me know in the chat. It's so weird to talk to a camera without any kind of feedback. Actually, there is a question. So I'm a consultant. Does this will count as technology field and having leadership qualities? So yeah, consultants, if you read the technician guide, you will see that consultants generally are not eligible. I have a video on my channel. Maybe somebody can find it and drop in chat about the difference between consultancies and product companies. And as I said in that video, like generally, technician says that people who have consultancy experience aren't eligible. However, you hear stories of people getting endorsed with consultancy experience. So these are just stories that I hear and things that I see on chats. However, I've never seen a case, like a ready case, that got endorsed where the person only worked in consultancies. So this is my honest answer. So I've never seen cases with my own eyes. I know they exist. I know it should be possible, even though technician guide says that it's not possible. So if you need help with this, I do encourage you to find companies or individual consultants who have experience with cases like this, who will help you formulate them better and who will help you just structure the documents in a way that will fit the requirements. So basically, it would be focusing on your work on the product and not your consulting experience, basically, and shaping it in this way. But again, this is a non-trivial task, I would say. When it comes to you, for instance, having some consultancy experience in the past, maybe like right now you work in a product company, but in the past you worked in a consultancy, and the question is like, do you hide this experience, or like what do you do with it? So in the past I thought that it was like really crucial to hide this experience and like not to talk about it at all, but actually it's not really the case. Like you should just um, focus in your application on the product experience. So your documents should be about your product work. Your You don't even have to like specify or mention, working at consultancies. This is not background check, or this is not a job application. You are not required to talk about every single thing you did in your life. You are just supposed to make a case for why you are a global talent, and the global talent is focused on the product led companies. So if you are getting letters of recommendation, they also need to be from people who have mostly worked with product. This is why I mentioned it before, and this is why this is so important in the visa application itself. So the people who write your letters of recommendation, make sure that their career and their claim to expertise comes from product companies. Okay, there was a question about how. Let me show this on the screen. Okay, where. Okay, let me pull this one up. So, how popular do the recommendation letter writers have to be? Again, as I mentioned before, maybe you can scroll back. Maybe I didn't cover it well enough, but there is no magic number or answer here. It really depends on the person, on the case. It's good if they have recognition online. If they don't, it's not the end of the world, but they need to have some impressive career. And impressive career can be something like the fact that they led leadership positions in a bunch of product companies and what achievements they did there. So you can present it this way. But generally, if you are choosing from two experts and one of them, and they're like they have the same similar career, but one of them has a public profile and the second one doesn't, then I would choose the one that has the profile. But other than that, it's not a requirement. But of course, I would encourage you, and I encourage my clients to look for experts who have some sort of public recognition, because then if technician decides to Google them and see what comes up, they will actually check their LinkedIn profile. So it's important like what is there. So I suggest people having like up to date LinkedIn profiles. But also if they Google their name, I think it's really cool if they find something. It's not a requirement, but it does improve your case. So I'm not going to pretend that it doesn't help to have famous people backing you. Like of course it helps. Like if you can get somebody who's has a leading position in Google, then of course it helps you. Of course it helps your application. Not a requirement, but it helps. Cool. Yeah, let's go to the innovation one, right? So yeah, innovation. The way to fail this criteria, it's actually quite easy, I think. The reason why is that Technation's guide for innovation is probably the worst part of the guide. So it's very vague. It doesn't really explain what is expected there. So people like one example that is given there is patents, haven't registered patents, but honestly, I have never had any client who've had a patent, and I think it's such a rare thing that we shouldn't worry about it. And this is where a lot of people get discouraged and they think that they can never meet this criteria because they don't have a registered patent. So this is not true. There is also another evidence piece that Technician Guide mentions when it comes to innovation, and it's proof of pay. But we've talked about this at length already. So if you have your pay slip, for instance, or your contract or your job offer that says that you're going to be paid X amount of money, and you submit it to Proof Innovation, And even saying this, it sounds a little bit ridiculous, but this is what people do when they follow the guide kind of to the letter. But the question is, you can ask yourself, is like, how does your salary prove innovation? Right? On its own, it doesn't. It just proves that you have a job. So, proven innovation is all about explaining innovation. So, if you think about your work, if you think about the company where you work at, it really helps if you work as an employee, if you work in an innovative field or a space that is considered innovative. So, for instance, if you're now working in something related to AI, or you're working with, again, Web3, um, you can present this space as an innovation. If you're using an older example of your experience from some other company, you can maybe convince technician that at that point this was an innovation, right? So it's all in the context of um, real world. So if you have experience from 5 years ago, which is actually the cutoff for the visa, so it has to be within the 5 years. And 5 years ago, this thing that you worked on, it was like a true innovation. You can explain it in your documents, and this can work as well. You can also think of things that you innovated within your work and something new that you introduced there. Of course, this is weaker, but still, I've heard of people being able to prove innovation just by showing the innovative approach that they brought to something. So, if you're thinking about innovation, ask yourself the following questions. So, if you're thinking about the project, ask yourself, so why is it innovative? Why is it unique? How is it innovative? How does it compare against the industry? And what is your specific role in this innovation? So, not your team, not the whole company, but what you specifically did in this innovation. So, for instance, if you're working in the legacy industry, you can talk about how your approach or your product or something that you did was a disruptor for this industry or for this company. It's really cool if you can find external proof of this being an innovation. So, one of my, I think my most recent live stream, you can find it on YouTube, was actually with one of my clients who actually chose innovation, and she is a data analyst. So, if you are thinking about innovation, I'd encourage you to check that video out. Again, maybe somebody very kind will share it in the chat because I don't have an assistant and I will count on you to do that. But basically, you can check out this interview, the latest one with my client. And if you are choosing innovation, I think this will help you. So basically, what she did was she was working as a data analyst on a game that was considered innovative, and she found a media publication about this game that said that this game was a new like breakthrough or something like this, and she used that screenshot as part of the document where she explained innovation. So um, there is no right or wrong format to prove innovation. Okay, there is the wrong format to prove innovation and just to submit your contract. But other than that, if you have a document that explains your contributions and your innovation at a company, this can be again a reference letter from somebody with a specific focus on innovation. This can be a combination of something that is self-written, so a document where you talk about the innovation in your own words. Then you have screenshots and links to maybe a publication that proves that this is an innovation. And you attach a reference letter that talks about this project as being innovative. Then you're much closer to actually fulfilling this criteria. So it doesn't have to be anything groundbreaking. It very much might be that you think that something is super normal, but maybe it's just because you are working in this industry or on this product for so long. Maybe you have this burden of knowledge. So again, I had a bunch of people on who thought that their work wasn't innovative. But for instance, if you work in fintech, a lot of the things that you do are actually innovative, and they're maybe introduced for the first time in the industry, maybe for the first time in the country or something like this. So it's not super easy to meet this criteria, but if you try, then maybe you'll be able to find innovation in the work that you do. So other thing that people use would be R&D grants that are granted for innovative work. There also are sometimes government grants for innovation. So in the UK, there is a grant for innovative businesses. There are competitions. There are things like that. There are some external proof that your work was innovative. This is mostly applicable to startups. I realize that, but it's something, right? So, and then especially if you're using your work on a startup to prove innovation, then yes, like things related to financials are very relevant here. So why is this relevant? The way I understand it is that if you're explaining that your startup is an innovation, then it makes sense for you to also show that this startup actually exists, that it has clients, that it has traction, that it has something going on there, to actually prove that this is innovation in the market. Because if you read the guide, you will see that they require you to show proof of product in the market, right? For startups, it's very easy to do this with proof of investments raised or how much money the business is making. So you can do this with screenshots from some internal dashboards, with letters from your investors, or like external publications. Really depends on what you can find. I do encourage you to look into this criteria if you feel that you can meet it, and look for ways to present a stronger case. Okay. Hope this explains it. Okay. Okay, it's an hour and a half, and I'm on criteria number one. So it's gonna be a long a long live stream. It is actually very hard to talk so much without a break. Cool. Let me take some questions. I usually used to take them at the end, but now I think that if you can only join me for a little while, it's not really nice to make you wait until the end. So I'll just go through them as it happens. Actually, if I missed your question, then can you please send it again, because it's quite a lot in the chat. And also, if new people joined, make sure to like this live stream and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done it. It really helps other people to discover the live stream. And with this one, my goal is to really share this information as widely as possible. So if you can share it in Telegram chats or any other places, I do ask you to do that, because my goal here is to make sure that people who are applying right now, kind of last minute, get endorsed and don't make similar, typical mistakes. This is why I'm taking time out of my day to do this. So I do appreciate any kind of support that you can give. Um, and I'm sure that people who will learn about this will appreciate it as well. Okay, so there was a question from Alina. What is the biggest difference between mandatory and optional criteria? Can you mix them in the application? So this question, to be honest, Alina, I'm sorry, I don't quite understand. What is the difference between mandatory and optional criteria? So honestly, I don't know. Can you please clarify what you meant? Because then I won't be guessing what you meant specifically. I think there is something in this question that is, if it's confusing, then it should be spoken about. But I don't know what exactly. Okay, so question from Natalia: is it better to add evidences for 3 OC3s or to focus on 2 OC3s? So Natalia, if you can let me know in the chat, where is this question coming from? Where were you told that you can apply for 3 optional criteria, or um, is this how you see it from the Tech Nation guide? Uh, you can't really choose 3 criteria. I mean, like, as I said, I was told that you can when you apply, but you shouldn't. The guide says 2 criteria, so you should choose them beforehand and focus on them to make sure that you meet them. Basically, that's the end of it, right? Uh, okay, so there's another question. Can I contact after the stream for premium coaching services? Yes, you can reach out to me on LinkedIn. On there is a link to my LinkedIn in the description box, and basically uh, everywhere else as well. You can find my name, Nadia Zhuk, on LinkedIn, Google, and message me there. Okay. Um, okay, let's go to the second criteria and the impact and recognition. 1 second. Okay, so what is the second criteria? Second criteria is proven that you have been recognized for advancing the field of tech outside of work. So the first criteria was usually people use it to use their work experience to fulfill it. Second criteria is what you do outside of your 9 to 5 job or outside of your startup or something like this. So there are typical documents that people use to meet this criteria. You can approach it in a variety of ways, but I think where people really struggle is that they don't really prove impact or recognition for this. So, for instance, if you're choosing to submit your mentorship experience to fulfill this criteria, uh, it's not enough just to have a screenshot from some random mentorship platform where you talk to two people. I mean, you can do that, but most likely this won't be enough. So you have to make a really convincing case for why advancing the field of tech outside of your day-to-day job was important to you, what impact you made there, and how you were recognized for it. This is what is also very important. So if this is mentorship, um, and the following is based on the multiple rejections that I've seen on of people online on forums. So in terms of mentorship, technician expects your mentorship to be done within a structured program with that has a curriculum and that has selection criteria for the mentors. So if your mentorship experience doesn't fulfill that, you can still potentially use it in your application, but just be aware that you need to still make it look very strong and convincing and show that you have spent a lot of your personal time on this. It's helpful to let them know how much, because again, there was a rejection that I saw where like part of this, like one sentence in the rejection mentioned something about the candidate not not spending enough time to on mentorship or something like this, and there are no guidelines as to how much time you should spend clearly, but you know if you mention how much time you spent, like at least you covered this scenario, like you won't be rejected because you haven't said how much you have spent on this. Then possibly you can appeal and convince them then the time that you spent was actually a lot or enough. So explain what exactly your mentorship was, what the program was, what the goal was, why you mentored there, how you were chosen, and things like that. Ideally, this comes from the organizers of the mentorship program and includes all of those things. And also mentions that they really recognize your impact and they really, I don't know, admire you for doing this. Um, and this has to be explicit. So it can't just be them. So some letters basically that I've seen are very like kind of just fact based. So it's like just like this person mentored in our organization in 2020. They taught programming to kids, and we're happy to confirm that. And it's like three sentences and the signature. And to me, it's like, what's the point of this, right? It's better than nothing, but it won't be enough for you to meet the criteria. It has to be much more detailed, and you have to explain this thing much more convincingly. And I hope that when you hear me talk about, for instance, mentorship experience, you understand that this advice that I'm giving, it doesn't apply just to mentorship. It applies to any kind of document that you use. All of the tips that I share, they're relevant throughout the document. So if you're choosing something else that you did, which is not mentorship, maybe it's volunteering at a conference, which is another good way to kind of back this criteria. You would also have a letter from the organizers of the conference, for instance, that explain how you were contributing and how you helped, and all of that. So showing the recognition, showing contribution, showing the impact is super important. You can have letters from your mentees or your students that talk about how your mentorships, changed their lives or something like this. It really depends on the situation, and these are the kind of specifics that I discuss with clients within like personal private coaching. But just think of this, and I hope that this structure helps you the structure helps you form your documents in a better way that meets the requirements much better. Cool. Let's go to the next one. So optional criteria number 3 is the criteria about contributions. So this is technical or commercial contributions to the growth of the digital tech company. This is something that I think most people choose. I haven't really seen anybody. Maybe not. I've seen people not choose it, but most people choose it. In my experience, it might be the easiest one to meet for a lot of people. So this is the criteria that you can meet by showing what specifically you did at a product-led company that helped the company grow. And this can be both technical things, but also it can be business things. Can be based around case studies of the work that you have delivered. And the way to prove it is it can be very different formats. Again, some people would have, for designers, for instance, you can have a document that is sort of like a case study that designers make, but adjusted for the purposes of the visa. So it can tell the story of what the project was, what the challenge was, why it was important, then like what you did, how you did it, what was your challenges. You would also add graphical proof of you doing this. And this is done differently by different people. But again, if you refer to the interview with my client on my YouTube, you will see that a very common way would be to just grab a screenshot of Jira that has your name associated with a certain piece of work. So, for instance, if your documents are about a project X, then you would have a screenshot that proves that you worked on project X. So people would have commit summaries from GitHub that tie their name to the project, right? So the idea here is that you need to tie your name to an important contribution or an important project. And here it's not enough, like it's not good if you like it's not okay. So it's not strong enough if your documents are just you talking about yourself. So it has to be backed by something else. So it has to be backed by reference letters or publications about your work, screenshots from some places that show that you worked on this. Usually it's combination of all of those things, right? So if I'm giving examples of what things you can use, I usually mean that ideally you should have all of those things. You can't have just one. So if you have just letters, just reference letters praising you, this will likely not be accepted because this is specifically mentioned in the guide. This is mentioned in a bunch of rejections that I've seen. If you only have letters, it's not strong enough. So if your case currently consists of just reference letters and your 5 contracts and payslips, then it's not good enough. You have to have something else. And I do encourage you to really spend time um, thinking of how you can present your evidence. So you are watching this on YouTube, you can open the main page, you can see the live streams that I've done over 20 of them, and you can look or listen to them and listen for examples of documents that people used. And you can learn a lot about various ways to prove contribution, to prove OC3. Just listen to those stories. So I specifically decided to interview people so that I can hear as many examples of documents as I can and share them publicly here on YouTube, so that you can get inspired and get ideas of how to prove this. But it can't just be letters. Just remember this. It also can't be just you talking about yourself. So when I say self-written documents or case studies or something like this, I don't mean that this is the only thing that proves something. So if you have project X, it can't just be a letter where, a document where you just praise yourself and say that, you are awesome and you saved the company. It's not strong enough. Like, who are you to talk about this, right? So like, it's clear you're biased. You will talk about this way, but still you can have a short, like a page where you talk about the project yourself. You have some screenshots that prove that you did it. Then you also have a reference letter from an expert that says that you actually did this project. And also it explains your impact, and it explains how this work that you did was really fundamental to the success of the company, and that without this project that the goals wouldn't be met, or whatever else is true and relevant for the company. But in terms of OC3, remember that it's very much about your impact, that is quantifiable in some way. So for impact, it's about before and after. It's what would have happened without you, how you move the needle in the business in a technical way or maybe a business way. So this is, I think, the easiest way to. This is actually not just for OC3. It's true for all the criteria. If you want to get rejected, you can you can try applying with just letters. So it's very likely you will be rejected. So I'm not saying that it's impossible to get it. I think it depends on what kind of letters they are. So I think that it's probably possible to have like incredibly strong letters from world-renowned specialists, or maybe your business raising $10 million or something like this. But even then, I would still encourage you to. I think if you're at this level of fame, then you would have something else to submit. You would probably have publications about your work. You would probably have some like interviews or something like this. Actually, I haven't mentioned this when I was talking about mandatory, but mandatory is very much, it's very easy to back mandatory with mentions, with media mentions. So your interviews in press, and things like that. So again, if you have something like this, you can submit it. Very often people don't remember being, like very often, like sometimes people don't remember being quoted by a media source somewhere online or something like this. So you might be surprised to discover that actually you gave a quote to some blog 5 years ago. You can use that in your case, because if you are quoted, it means that you are important enough that somebody quoted you, right? So remember this too. Okay, let me look at the question and have some tea in the meantime. Let me know how you're doing. Is everybody as tired as I am, or are you still um, processing information, or is it already too much? Okay, so a question from Alina. I'll try to specify my question about MC and OC. So I have 3 pieces of evidence. 2 of them are surely about the second criteria. Can I use the third one in the mandatory criteria? Yes. I mean, I'm not sure like what is the concern here. So if you have documents, you have 2 that are for sure about the second criteria. They go there, and then you submit the third one in the mandatory criteria if this document fulfills the mandatory criteria. So if it talks about your leadership, then you can use it. Hope this makes sense and hope it answers your question. But basically, one question that I think somebody asked me today earlier was about how many documents how many documents you should have or something like this. So if you have 10 documents, 10 supporting evidences, then very often people would have 4 documents towards the mandatory and 3 documents toward each of the optional. It's not a requirement, it's not a rule, it's not anything. It's just something that makes sense and it looks balanced. However, often people would have something else. So they would have 5 documents for mandatory, they would have 2 for optional, 3 for another optional or something like this. I would encourage you not to have an optional criteria that is just 1 document. Usually it's best to have something else, especially, for instance, if you're applying for innovation and you're using the talent route. I would really encourage you to have several documents because for talent, for instance, you have to have a track record of innovation. How I think it's quite difficult to prove like a track record of innovation in just 1 document. I mean, you can have a letter that talks about like 3 examples of innovation, but you need something else. And I think it's just easier to have separate pieces of evidence. So, for instance, most typical case would be if you're applying for talent, you would have 3 documents about innovation. So, project A, project B, and project C. And each piece of evidence is about a specific project and it explains why this project was innovative. So this makes it, I know it sounds very boring and people sometimes like to be very creative, but I think that boring in this case is very good. When it's clear, what the point of the document is, then the assessor will be able to read it easily, scan it, and put the checkbox, mark the checkbox that yes, there is a track record of innovation and just move on, right? Okay. There is another. Your previous videos have been really helpful. Thanks so much. I'm glad to see that. Okay, so working as a contractor, red flag for technician. So contractor. So depends like where you work, right? If you're a contractor at a product-led company, then it's not that much of a red flag. I know a lot of people who got endorsed for the visa while working as a contractor at a product company. This is very typical for a lot of locations. So, for instance, for Eastern Europe, India, most people there work. I assume I don't have the statistics, but a significant proportion of developers there work as contractors for. Okay, most of them work as consultants at consultancies, but that's beside the point. A lot of people work as contractors for product-led companies that are located in the United States, right? This way, in this situation, you are actually an employee. You can be treated as an employee at the product company. So in your application, you would be talking about your product experience, your work, and how you contributed. So I know somebody who was endorsed after they submitted proof of working. Proof of high pay at the company where they worked as a contractor, and this is the document they submitted. Again, I mean, unless you don't have any stronger documents, then I'm like the more I do this, the less I'm excited about just submitting pay information. Not sure that it tells much of a story, but generally, it shouldn't be that much of a red flag as being a consultant. So it's more about how, like, what you do and whether the company where you work develops its own product. If you can answer this question affirmatively, then this experience can apply. If your company where you work is not building product but out is an out- is an outsourced company and building products for somebody else, then this experience is not relevant and I would not use it in my application as one of the proofs. Okay, yep, glad that I could help. Cool. Yeah, actually, this mistake is tied to this question. So thanks for the question. So it is in your application, you should focus on your product experience. I have talked about it a lot on my YouTube, and I will continue talking about it today, I think. But focus on your product-led experience. Understand whether what you did was product-led work or not. Some people struggle with this. But once you understand it, you can understand whether this is relevant or not. However, I think this distinction between consultancies and not consultancies is not as hard to understand, not as hard to explain as something else. So I've also heard people getting rejected because their experience wasn't considered product led, because the company where they worked weren't considered product led, even though it did develop its own digital product. So a good example of this is people working in banks, or like digital banks, right? Or banks that have a digital division. So in cases like this, if you have experience like this, you might see rejections online because somebody works at a bank, like, I don't know, Deutsche Bank, for instance. However, it doesn't mean that you can't get the visa, because you would also find a lot of people who work at Deutsche Bank or Tinkoff Bank or other banks or other digital banks that got endorsed. So the difference between getting endorsed or not getting endorsed is how well you explain your case and how clear you make it to technician that this was actually a digital led, like a product led, a digital company, right? So if you work in a bank, you can explain how this is a digital bank, how this is building digital products, what is the significance of the digital part of this business. Again, if you open the live streams on my channel, you will see an interview with Mikhail, who actually works as a CPO, so a Chief Product Officer, at the Deskimir, which is a company that is well known to, I think, pretty much everybody in Eastern Europe. But basically, if you think about this name and you don't explain it too much, you might think that this is a chain of physical stores that sell goods for children, which is one of the things that this actually does. So when I was interviewing Mikhail, I was actually surprised. I was interested in how he explained the digital part of it. So if you watch this interview, I think this will be very helpful. If you work in companies that are not as easy to define as digital companies, so if you work in Google, then like for sure this is a digital company. You don't have to do anything. If you work in a company like this, Kimir, or I had another interview with somebody who worked at Dodo Pizza, which is product, and also it's a pizza delivery company, which has a digital product, which is a huge part of its business, actually, right? So you have to explain how the thing that you worked on was actually a big part of the business. That, for instance, for the store that I mentioned, that they actually have a huge e-commerce business that is, as far as I remember, like one of the largest by volume in the region or something like this. So if you explain this context in your documents and you make a really convincing case for why the company where you work is actually digital and the focus is on tech in your documents, then I think you can decrease the chances of you getting rejected. But I just wanted to warn you that probably a lot of rejection that I've seen on forums is from people who work in some entities that have the word bank in them, and I think this can be like not really like a red flag, but this is something that requires work from you explaining the part of digital tech in it. So if you are talking about a bank, you can present it as more of a fintech company and explain your contributions to the product, right? So hopefully this makes it clear as well. If you have questions on that, please let me know. I think that the next reason, they being too shy, I covered it before, but basically a lot of people would feel really self-conscious praising themselves in the documents or asking somebody to praise them. And we've talked about it. I talk about this with a lot of my clients, and this is something that most people struggle with. Um, there are cultures where you are brought up to be promoting yourself, advocating for yourself, presenting your interests and just being out there in the world, just kind of protecting your interest. And this is something that you have been taught to do from from early age. So this is natural to you. In a lot of cultures, this is not the way I was brought up, and this is not the way a lot of people in Eastern Europe are brought up, especially women. Um, so for the purposes of the application, you need to forget about this a little bit and understand that the expectations are different. And for this visa, it's not enough to be a good specialist. And this is specific language that I saw in one of the rejections, that technician said, it's clear to us that this person is a good specialist and they're competent and they're a great worker, but it's not enough. So they're looking for something more than just being a good specialist. So if you have a job and you do the job well and you're just fulfilling the expectations there, then it might be difficult for you to get the visa without really explaining what was special about what you did. So this is why I encourage people to not be shy, to really advocate your case, because you are your own promoter in this case. This is what I do as a coach. I unpack the person's experience and I find a way to really make their achievements shine in the best possible way. If you're doing this on your own, you have to do this for yourself. But no matter how uncomfortable this is, I do encourage you to be open and kind of brave in really advocating for yourself. If this is difficult for you, also maybe you can let me know in the chat, and maybe I can share some tips or something that helps, or how to work through this. I think one thing that can really help is getting a review from me or from another coach before you apply. And if you're interested, the link to my website is again in the description box, and there is the description of what the review entails. But when I do a review package of somebody's documents, I usually can find places where the language can be made stronger, where you can be praising yourself a little bit more. So I can help with that. If you prefer to work on your own, you can ask somebody, like a friend, to read your document and say whether they are impressed or not. Again, I think I shared it before. Also, you can, if you're writing something about yourself, you can start writing it in the third person so that you have a little bit of a distance between you and the content. So this helps a lot of people as well. But yeah, if this doesn't work, again, let me know. I can maybe think of something else. Okay, so the next one is being too high context. In this, I don't know, let me know again if you if you understand what is high context and low context. If you read the Culture Map book, I'm just a big fan of the book. And the more I work with clients from different cultures, the more I see that this book is really golden and everybody should read it. But high context cultures, they have communication style that is based very much on body language, tone of voice, and just overall context, right? So a lot of things are implied. And in low context cultures, the communication is more straightforward and more explicit. So you can find the culture map and you can Google culture map, high context, low context. But if you are on the high context kind of spectrum, towards the end, kind of for the high context, you might find this application process a little bit difficult. And also, if you get rejected, you might be really shocked that you are rejected. And this is what I've seen a lot of times. So somebody thinks that they have actually made a really good case for themselves as a specialist, as a talent, but technician says, we don't see it, right? So the problem is that perhaps you're operating within this high context. Perhaps you think that you have explained it well enough. Perhaps you mention a sentence somewhere, you mention, like, you use some words that in your head they explain that this thing is actually big, but in reality this thing exists only in your head. And if somebody from your culture was reading this, they would understand it, right, from your high context culture. So if I'm not mistaken, the United States is a very, I mean, I remember that it's a very low context culture, so it's much more direct. The UK is sort of still high context because there is a lot of things that are implied and just not said directly. But in any case, when you are writing documents like this, or when you are communicating with somebody from a different culture than yours, you should be operating in the low context style. So um, if you are from a high context culture, so for instance, if you are from Asia, and you know that the UK is also a high context culture, but your context is very different. So you are living in kind of culturally in different worlds. And this is third hour of the live stream, and I'm talking about cultural differences. But I do think that this is important, and this is what um, I just wish somebody explained to me much earlier. So, for instance, if you have this high context culture and you are talking to somebody who's also high context, but they're a different culture, it's very likely that you won't understand each other if you've. Uh, Let me know if you have experiences like this where you think that you express yourself super clearly, but nobody understood you. Um, so this is what you really don't want to happen in the visa application, because this is your visa, this is your uh, future, and this is your immigration story. So in the context of the visa, just make sure that you are as explicit as possible about your whole experience. So make sure you explain to the assessor why the things that you are talking about are important, why they're impressive. It might feel to you very repetitive. If you're high context, it might feel that this is, um, I don't know, rude, or maybe, how do I say it? Like low manners, bad manners to explain this, because it's like, everybody knows it. Like, it's clear that, like, why would you say that? It's so rude. So I do encourage you to be very explicit, very rude in those. I mean, rude, not like actually rude. Please don't be rude to technician assessors, but just be explicit and explain things. So as a coach, if I am reviewing someone's documents, I often I feel a little bit bad because I act as a devil's advocate, and I try to find ways how technician might misinterpret the things that the person has written, and how they might misunderstand it, how they might miss the idea that the person was trying to convey. So you can do this for yourself, and you can read your documents and ask yourself a question. Okay, will they be able to understand it, or will they misunderstand it? If you're clear, if it looks really obvious to you what you say, you can make it a little bit more obvious, and then probably you're good enough. But this is also a takeaway that I want you to take from this, that it is important. So don't ignore this part. Even if you're very tired and you want to apply today, take another day to make sure that that you have done your best and you have explained yourself in as low context version as you can, right? Okay. Question to people who are still here: does the low context, high context part make sense? And whether you can see ways maybe in your application of things that probably won't translate well and won't be understood well. I'm curious to hear what you think. Cool. Let's move forward. Okay, so another way to get rejected is actually using your existing CV, which is what a lot of people do. Somehow It's not explained in the guide, and I think I'm not sure why, but anyways, uh, I don't recommend to use the existing CV that you have. So again, each document has a purpose. So your existing CV has the purpose of you getting a job. So it focuses on your, a lot of the time it focuses on your skills. So if you're a programmer, this CV would focus on your programming languages that you know, on the tools that you mastered, on something like this, and that's kind of the focus of it. For the technician, it's usually easiest to create a whole new CV. This is what I do with my clients. We create a CV from scratch, um, which is very specifically tailored to what technician wants to see. So if you're applying, make sure that your CV follows those things that I'm about to tell you. Also, for the CV, remember that once you apply, the first document that technician will read will be your personal statement, and I will talk about personal statement in a minute. But then there will be the CV. So your CV has a very important purpose in this. It has to show you as an exceptional talent. So it has to be amazing. So it has to be really strong, really impressive. It can't just be like normal, mellow CV that talks about you knowing how to use, uh, I don't know, PowerPoint. Although hopefully people don't do that anymore, but you get the point. Like it can't be your usual CV. Usually a CV for technician is, first of all, it's much longer. It's 3 pages, right? It's not the like 1 page CV that people who have fewer than 5 years of experience are supposed to submit. So it's 3 pages. The biggest part of it is the career, and there you would list the places where you worked within the last 5 years. You don't have to go any further, just the most impressive places of work. For each place of work, you would talk about your biggest achievements that are just impressive. So numbers, they tell a story, all the usual stuff about making a convincing CV apply, but it's kind of like a good CV on steroids, right? So it's like super impressive CV. All of your achievements, like what you've done, the project that you've led, the impact. It's cool to add publications in the media about the project that you delivered, inside the CV, like actual links to them. Then you would also have a section about public speaking, about your publications, about your community work, about your open source, about your volunteering. And those would be just the biggest, kind of the main sections there. The part about publications, it's mentioned in the guide, but still I see people ignore it very often because I think they just use their old regular CV. So, but this stuff is important for this visa. You have to have links to your publications. You have to have links to your public speaking. You have to have links to volunteering efforts that you have done. All of this is very important, and just don't ignore it. Don't think that it's not important. It's important. Like your CV is one of the most important documents. So really spend time on this. So it can't just be last minute, uh, like random CV that you have flying around somewhere. Just write a new CV. Don't try to save time on this. It's really important. Does this explanation make it clearer about the CV? Uh, if not, follow up with the questions. I'll be happy to tell you more. But for now, this is the general approach to CV. Impressive accomplishments, publications, public speaking, open source. Like it all needs to be there with some statistics. So if it's publication, you can add the statistics of how many people read it, for instance. So this can make your application stronger too. Okay, the next one. So we're actually coming close to the end, which is exciting. Missing the point of the personal statement. So what do you think is the point of the personal statement? Who is listening online? Let me know. Like, what do you think is like why the personal statement is there, and like whether it's important or not? What do you think? Because I do find it that a lot of people, they think that personal statement is just, again, like a random thing that you do like last minute without worrying about it too much. But personal statement is the first thing that they will read about you. So it's your unique chance to tell your story in the language that you choose, the way you choose it. So it's one of the most important documents. So it has to, there is no specific structure it has to follow. Usually it has to fulfill to meet to do two things. So it should explain how you meet the requirements for the visa. So it should explain how you are a leader, how you innovated, like how you made an impact in tech, very briefly. So it's not the repetition of everything that you have written in other documents. It's only 1,000 words, so you won't have enough space. But it's like a super short story of your career up to now, not just recounting like what you did in high school and then what you studied in the university, and then um, we don't really need the information about all of your jobs. Focus on the most important achievements, and also just ask yourself, like, why is it here? How does it prove that I'm a leader? Like, how does it prove that I'm worthy of this visa? And once you do that, the next part is explain how, like, there is this question. And again, like, TechNation has the bullet points for what the personal statement should include. You have to use the bullet points. Like, don't ignore them. The questions are there. They have to be answered in your application, in your statement. So it has the question of how you will advance the economy, or like why you do need the visa. So you should explain how you will advance the digital economy. So it's not really a place for you to talk about your um, I don't know, how much you like London or something like this, or how much you like British culture. It's more about what you will do for this country. So, what will your contribution be? If you are already in the UK on another visa, then you need to explain why you need this new visa. And it can't be just you saying, I got laid off and I need to stay in the country, even though it might be true, actually. Or, just you saying that my student visa is expiring and I need a new one. So it has to be something more than that, because again, this is not a work visa. This is global talent visa. So the requirements and the expectations are a little bit higher. And in my experience, most people, but also, like, don't overthink this part. It's not like it's not worth spending like a week thinking about your plans in the UK if you have to apply urgently. Write something that is true and specific to you, to your life, to your goals. Like, what do you plan to achieve in the UK? Like, what are your aspirations? um, what are your dreams? Will you advance the economy? And be specific about it. Make it kind of sound authentic, and use an authentic example, basically. So if you want to start a startup, you can use an example of a startup that you really want to start, or something like this. So all of this helps you present like a really strong kind of beginning to your case. So it starts with a personal statement. This is your opportunity to convince them that you are the global talent that they're looking for, get them very excited, anchor them towards the things that you want to convey. So if you're making a case that you are an innovator, for instance, make sure that your personal statement mentions that. If you're presenting yourself as somebody who is very passionate about community and attracting more people in tech, make sure that your personal statement really goes into that as well. It's not detailed, there is not that much space, but you can express this in a sentence or two. You can say that you have done a lot for the community by volunteering at organization X, Y, and Z, and that you also plan to do those things in London on a global scale. And you have this mission of I don't know, helping people from without CS degrees get into tech, which is one of the things that I was doing before. So this is why the examples comes up, and you can mention that, and you can mention like how you achieved that. So, for instance, in my case, I mentioned that I wrote and published a book with that goal, and then I started sharing content, and achieved recognition for that as an opinion leader. Since this was kind of my previous niche, opinion leader among people who are trying to break into tech from non-technical backgrounds. So tie this into like the criteria, and also how you will continue doing that, for instance, once granted the visa. And this whole personal statement, it should just read as a whole. It should read like a document that makes sense. It's your opportunity to connect the dots. If you have some things in your application that maybe aren't the strongest, or you aren't that excited about them. Um, you can explain those things, right? So, for instance, if um, I don't know, I don't have a good example here, but if there was something strange in your application, or for instance, if you're a career switcher and you're older but you're applying for promise, right, as a aspiring leader, then this is a place where you can say that before I switched to tech, I spent 10 years working as a teacher, for instance. And this is like a nice way to, you know, um, explain why you're applying for promise, even though maybe you're in your 30s. So this is general structure of a personal statement. Again, if this is it's not clear, let me know in the comments. Um, okay, there was a question. Is it a question? So what would you like to achieve in the UK? I don't know if it's a question, but yes, you need to understand. You need to have an answer to this. Like, obviously, those things change, and maybe right now you want to achieve one thing, but then you will achieve something else. But you need to understand. Um, you need to have a good answer to that, and I think that without it, you won't be able to submit a personal statement that is successful. So yeah, I don't know. If this was a question, just let me know. Think that's it for the personal statement. I've covered typical mistakes, and yeah, there is, as I said, there is no like required format, but there are just things that can derail your personal statement. Cool. Let's go to the next one. So yeah, this is a short one. Don't ignore the 3-page rule. If people tell you that you can submit 500 pages of documents and you can still get endorsed, um, I would encourage you. I would encourage you to not not do that. There is a rule. Just follow it. Make it really easy for a technician. I've seen rejections where the people were rejected for a bunch of reasons, and there were maybe like 5 specific things that were wrong with the application. And one of them would be that a lot of the documents ignored the 3-page rule and that were over 3 pages. It's possible that it was kind of sort of a case of a death by a thousand cuts, where there was so much wrong with the case that this thing was also wrong and it got mentioned. So maybe if the case is stellar and there is one document that is 4 pages instead of 3, it will still work. So this might be the case, right? But each thing that you do that you break through, it increases your risks of just getting the assessor annoyed and getting rejected. So I don't really see the point why you would do that. Um, Also, what is likely to happen is that they will just read the first 3 pages and ignore the rest. So you might actually shoot yourself in the foot and lose the opportunity to present some evidence, because if your evidence is on page 6 and they only looked at 3 pages, then it's like, what's the point? Again, like, I don't get the point of having longer documents. I understand that it's very difficult to fit everything in 3 pages, and a lot of my time working with clients is spent actually with us trying to fit the stuff in 3 pages. It's surprisingly difficult, especially if you have a lot of links. But you have to do it. You have to be creative with the layout, the fonts sometimes, but also just don't go too much into that and don't have tiny fonts. But you have to be creative with the space and how you format stuff, but keep within the limit and make it easy for the assessor just to give you the visa, and you can get the visa and move on with your life and not apply again and again. And I think this one is also important. It's more, I think it's more abstract, and it's actually my last one. Okay, amazing. 2.5 hours. So yeah, this is the last mistake that I will talk about. Probably it's not the last that you can make. There is a limited number of mistakes, but this is probably the biggest one, the most popular one. This is also your chance to ask your remaining questions if you're watching this live. If this is a recording, also you can ask in comments if The questions are well scoped, and I can answer them in the comment. I do that, so you can look at the comments under my previous videos. So don't hesitate to ask, basically. But this one, I think, is pretty big. So your whole thing should be consistent, and it works on a variety of levels. So first of all, the claims that you're making, they should all make sense. The story itself should make sense. So your CV should match your personal statement, and your letters should match both your CV and your personal statement, and your LinkedIn should match your CV, not only in terms of dates, but dates should match, but also in terms of content. So all of this should be consistent. All of it should make sense. I've seen some rejections where the assessor said that something, I don't remember the exact details, but something didn't add up. So for instance, if your letter of recommendation says that we worked at Google together in 2020, but they go to the expert's profile on LinkedIn and it says that they didn't work at Google in 2020, this is one thing that might just look weird. So um, I'm not saying that this will necessarily cause you to get rejected, but also it's just something that diminishes the credibility of the whole story. So it's worth taking the time to make sure that all the dates line up, that your CV and your LinkedIn is up to date. In general, with LinkedIn, I advise you to have like a build out LinkedIn profile. This is, again, I also have a live stream on my YouTube about making a strong profile. For LinkedIn, it's good for job search, for networking, but for the visa, it's also good to have something that is there. It's kind of a public profile of you as a specialist. So you can update it. You should update it before you apply. For your experts, ideally, they should also have updated LinkedIn profiles. I know that not everybody uses LinkedIn. So for people like this, it's best to submit their CV. I think I actually forgot to tell you that. Yeah. So if you're submitting the letters of recommendation, they should have either a link to LinkedIn or they should have the CV of the person writing the letter. It's a strict requirement. So make sure you follow it. So yes, everything in your story should connect. Everything should make sense. There shouldn't be some weird places that are just left hanging and unanswered that would just raise suspicion or confuse people or annoy them. Again, consistent topic here is not annoy the people who are reviewing your application. You want them to have a good time when they're reading your application. You want them to learn something. This is why I recommend people don't really use too much technical jargon where it can be avoided. I mean, there will be jargon, of course, but explain it in simple words so that when an assessor reads your case, they would actually be pleasantly surprised by your achievements, but also they will learn something. And I think it's very important that they understand something new, and the documents that they read, they can learn something about the world, which I think just makes for a really nice experience for them. And I hope that it's an important part of your work on your application to ensure that they have a good time reading it. And I think that it really helps to increase your chances. If your application is well written, it doesn't have to be perfect English. Like, you don't have to hire a native speaker to help you with that, but it needs to be kind of clean, logical, structured. It has to cover all the check boxes that we discussed. It has to avoid all of the red flags that I mentioned, all of the typical mistakes. And that's about it. That's the key to success. That's the key to Okay, that's not the key to success, but that's the key to avoiding failure, at least. Hope this was helpful. If you need any kind of further assistance, especially like last minute review of your documents, you can go to my website, vitalhelp.com/talent, and you can see my various services. So there is a review package where you can basically hire me to review your documents before you apply. I think this is useful if you want this additional peace of mind before you apply, so that I can catch some of the errors that maybe you didn't see. You can also reach out to me on LinkedIn. Um, if, for instance, you don't want the complete package, but maybe you just want to book an hour with me and ask some questions, if they're well scoped and we can answer them within an hour, then this is another way to go. um, if you decide to kind of go your own way, this is also great, but I do encourage you to follow me to show support and let me know if this was helpful to you in your application. I obviously do this to help as many people apply on their own as possible. So I do believe that a lot of people can actually submit successful applications on their own. So this is why I'm sharing the information. But also, I think a big part of being successful in life is also being realistic about your own limitations in terms of time or just stuff that you are not good at, right? So if you feel that you don't have the time or you aren't that good at crafting documents like this, then this is another reason to get in touch with me, and I will be happy to help you finalize your application and apply. So what else did I want to say? Following, yes, support for my channel will be very much appreciated. um, it does take uh, time and work doing this. I enjoy it, but also it's always good to see feedback and people sharing videos and spreading the word. Okay, so cool. We have some questions that are very kind of specific to a particular use case of a person, so this is something that is better to discuss within a private session, since this won't be that useful to others listening to this, and I do try to make these videos as useful to general audience as possible. So yeah, Q&A, we've actually done a lot of Q&A through 2.5 hours. So some feedback from Efa. Thank you very much. Videos have been very helpful. Um, really appreciate it. So I have a message from Mohammed, LinkedIn. Yes, if anybody else wants to chat with me, you can send me a connection request on LinkedIn, and you can mention that you watched this webinar so that I understand where you're coming from. That's it. I don't have any more slides. 25 slides are gone just so quickly. Time flies. So, okay. Yeah. Hope this was helpful. Really looking forward to hearing your feedback in the comments. Let me know if you have time. Um, what would really be interesting for me from this is, was there something that you learned from this that you didn't know before? And what was this thing? So for me, it's very useful content, very useful feedback as a content creator and also as a coach, because then I can understand what is still missing from the explanations, from the videos and the stuff that we talk about on this channel. Cool. That's it for me. I hope you enjoyed it. I had a really nice time doing this. And yeah, that's it. That's it for me. Have a nice evening, everybody. Bye.